War is always tough and brings immense suffering. Ancient battles were particularly brutal, and soldiers in the Roman legions faced incredible dangers, with many not surviving. But what happened to those who made it through? It's important to remember that back then, there was no modern medicine and hygiene was very poor. The Roman army, famous for its discipline and amazing engineering skills, still found itself in incredibly difficult situations when it came to health and injuries. Every battle left hundreds, sometimes thousands of soldiers wounded, and their destiny was shaped not just on the battlefield, but in the aftermath too. The way they managed the period after battles tells us a lot about how developed Roman civilization was and their attitude towards human life. Watch this video to the end to discover how a single decision from their commanders could save thousands of lives, and why wounded soldiers were so vital to the state. Once the battle was over and the fighting slowly went silent, the hardest part began. Unlike today's armies where special teams evacuate the wounded, in Rome their fellow soldiers did this job. Yes, you heard that right. Often, to prevent panic and keep spirits up, soldiers who had just been fighting would become stretcher bearers themselves. It was extremely tough and risky work. Not only did they have to carry the wounded, but they also had to stay safe themselves, as enemy soldiers or looters might still be around. They had clear orders. First, rescue anyone still breathing and with a chance of making it. Sadly, those who weren't moving were often left behind. It was a harsh but practical decision, given the times. They rushed to do all this work, often under the cover of night or at dawn. Roman soldiers themselves told stories of carrying their wounded friends for miles to the nearest camp. This built strong bonds within the units, making them more than just a group of fighters. Every soldier needed to know that if they were hurt, they wouldn't be abandoned on the battlefield. This led to a unique way of helping each other. Sometimes, fit soldiers would use their own shields as makeshift stretchers for the wounded. These shield stretchers were uncomfortable and heavy, but they saved lives. The Romans were pioneers in setting up a system like this, which not only saved lives but also kept spirits high. It's incredible how this simple idea, using shields as stretchers, helped thousands of wounded soldiers survive. However, caring for the wounded didn't stop there. Right after evacuation, the next crucial step began: first aid and medical treatment. Temporary hospitals called Valitudinaria were set up where the wounded were checked and given first aid. Unlike other armies back then, where shamans, healers, or priests looked after the wounded in the Roman army, this job belonged to medici, professional military doctors. They could not only apply splints and stop bleeding, but also carry out difficult surgeries. These doctors were trained in special schools and had a lot of experience. They practiced their skills right on the battlefield, which naturally made them even better. Roman military medicine was so advanced they even used basic forms of germ-killing solutions. Roman doctors understood that cleanliness was key and used vinegar, wine, and boiling water to clean things. This was a huge leap forward, especially since they didn't even know about bacteria and viruses back then. This was particularly important when treating wounds. Doctors washed them to stop infections, which often proved fatal. The Romans were the first to really use surgical tools like bronze and steel tweezers, scalpels, and forceps. These instruments were far more advanced than what other groups had, leading to more successful operations. But like any system, it wasn't perfect. Not all medici had the same level of experience. Legions often had doctors with different skill levels, from experienced surgeons who could amputate limbs to basic medics who did dressings and simple tasks. Even so, the basic medical knowledge among Roman soldiers was much better than what other cultures had. Plus, the Romans were pioneers in organizing knowledge about medicinal plants. They used different plants to ease pain, heal wounds, and reduce swelling. Naturally, not every wounded soldier survived, but these practices meant the Roman army had a much higher survival rate than their enemies. The Roman military medical system was truly unique for its era, built on key parts like getting the wounded off the field, setting up field hospitals, and having skilled doctors. The Romans knew that healthy, effective soldiers were crucial for winning wars. So, they focused heavily on this, putting money into training doctors and making medical gear. Even after the wars ended and legions were disbanded, many veterans, went home receiving pensions and land. Wounded veterans got extra help. This meant that wounded Roman soldiers were living proof that Rome looked after its heroes, which was a strong encouragement for new recruits. Also, the Roman army usually divided roles among its medics. For instance, capsari were stretcher bearers, who helped move the wounded from the battlefield to the Valitudinaria. A medicus ordinarius was a doctor directly involved in treatment. This clear structure helped them manage resources well and offer better care. Training medics took a long time and a good memory, as much of their knowledge was taught by speaking, not writing. In their schools, doctors learned about anatomy, how the body is put together, and physiology, how it works, plus the basics of surgery. They learned by doing, helping more experienced doctors. Roman medics were true professionals, and even without modern tech, they pulled off amazing feats. The whole system was really well organized. The Romans knew that having skilled doctors and good medical care really boosted soldiers' morale. Soldiers felt confident they wouldn't be left behind if something went wrong, and that they'd get expert help if wounded. This certainly had a big impact on their mental state and made them more motivated. Centuries later, many ideas from Roman military medicine were used by other cultures. However, it's surprising that despite all their cleverness and amazing engineering skills, the Romans never thought to mass-produce portable bandages and sterile dressings. This was a big miss, as wounds often got infected despite their efforts, leading to gangrene and limb amputations. What other unexpected detail of Roman medicine do you think other cultures picked up on? Share your thoughts in the comments. Once, wounded soldiers arrived at the camp. They were taken to a special place that we could call an early version of a field hospital. The Romans called it a valetudinarium. These were special tents where all the wounded were brought. Valitudinaria were always placed in the safest part of the camp, far away from potential attacks. Special officers were in charge of organizing them, and treatment was given by specialists, what we'd call military doctors today. These doctors were usually Greeks, as Greek medicine was seen as the most advanced then. They had a lot of experience and knowledge from their training. The Valitudinaria had everything available at the time: clean water, various instruments, and a collection of herbs and ointments for treating wounds. Roman doctors understood how important it was to stay clean, so they tried their best to wash their tools and hands. However, unlike today, they didn't know about germs. Their idea of cleanliness was more instinctual. The tents were split into different areas, one for the seriously wounded, one for those needing amputations, and another for minor injuries. Each valetudinarium had beds where the wounded lay. Soldiers were given clean clothes and blankets to keep them warm. Doctors worked tirelessly, helping everyone who needed it. The doctors were assisted by castrari, ordinary soldiers who helped carry the wounded, change dressings, and do other chores. Did Roman soldiers really get why hygiene mattered? And why was it sometimes safer to be wounded on the battlefield than in the camp? In addition to medical care, the Valitudinaria offered a complete system for care and recovery. The wounded were given special meals, light soups, bread, and fresh fruit when available. They also paid close attention to the soldiers' mental well-being. Doctors and officers would chat with them, offer encouragement, and share news from the front lines. This wasn't just kindness, it was a military strategy. Wounded soldiers' spirits had to stay high so they could get back to duty quickly. Despite all these efforts, conditions in field hospitals were far from perfect. Dirt, too many people, and poor air circulation created ideal conditions for infections to spread. Doctors did everything possible to maintain cleanliness, but without knowing about bacteria, their efforts often weren't enough. Unfortunately, many soldiers died from sepsis, blood poisoning, and gangrene in the hospitals, not on the battlefield. Even a small scratch, if not properly treated, could be deadly. This was the brutal daily reality of that era. Doctors in field hospitals weren't just medics, they were true experimenters. They constantly searched for new treatments, testing various herbs and ointments. Some methods, like using wine as an antiseptic, worked very well. Others, like sealing wounds with a hot iron, cauterizing, were incredibly painful and didn't always get the job done. They learned from errors, wrote down their findings, and shared experiences with other doctors. This way, Roman military medicine was always growing and getting better. The Roman legions also had a well-organized evacuation system. There were people within the camp itself responsible for transporting the wounded to the Valitudinaria. They were specially trained in how to carry the injured correctly to avoid causing further harm. In big battles, when there were many wounded, they even used combat chariots to move them. Of course, this was rare, but that fact alone tells you a lot. The Romans were very serious about saving their soldiers' lives. However, despite all these measures, wounded soldiers continued to die. And it wasn't just because they didn't know about germs. Doctors often dealt with what we now call traumatic shock. The death rate was very high, and doctors didn't know how to treat it. They tried to calm victims and gave them pain relief, but often this wasn't enough. This part of the story gives us a look behind the scenes of the Roman military, showing that even in the toughest times, people tried to help each other, and that in a system that seemed so unbreakable and harsh, there was still room for kindness and care. It was a time when human life was valued not just during battle, but in the field hospital too. This focus on both treatment and care for the wounded became the basis for modern military medicine. The Romans were innovators in many areas, and medicine was certainly one of them. Their knowledge and experience, passed down through generations, saved thousands of soldiers' lives, ultimately making their army one of history's most powerful. But what if these medical achievements were just one part of the story, and the other side was incredible cruelty? Can we truly celebrate progress that cost hundreds of thousands of lives? Keep watching to find out. The medical instruments Roman doctors used were amazing for their era. They weren't just made from whatever was lying around, but carefully designed and built. Each Roman legion had its own standardized kit, which came with a full range of different tools and was carried with the army. Among them were special forceps to pull out arrowheads that might be stuck deep inside the body. There were also surgical knives made from high-quality, very sharp and thin steel. Saws were used for amputations, and they stitched wounds with special needles and threads made from plant fibers or thin animal tendons. They also had special tools for setting dislocated joints and broken bones. Roman surgeons were true experts at what they did. They could perform difficult operations like drilling into the skull, trepanation, to ease pressure on the brain after a head injury. They even had their own ways to dull pain. They used opium, belladonna, or mandrake to lessen the suffering of wounded soldiers during operations. Of course, this was very dangerous, as too much could kill someone. But given the times, it was the only way to help someone. Every such procedure carried huge risks. Despite this, thanks to their bravery and skill, Roman surgeons saved many lives that would have otherwise been lost. Roman doctors' scissors were probably one of the most useful tools they had. They came in various sizes, from large ones for cutting skin and tendons to small thin ones for more delicate tasks. These scissors not only made precise cuts possible, but also helped remove dead tissue, which was vital for stopping infection. Even though doctors didn't understand sterilization the way we do today, they tried to wash their tools really well in boiling water or wine. Of course, this didn't kill all germs, but it greatly lowered the risk of infection. In addition to standard instruments, there were also more specialized ones. For example, to remove bone fragments or other foreign objects from the body, Roman surgeons used curettes. These were curved metal tools with a small hook at the end, used to carefully clean wounds of fragments without further harming the tissues. They also had special enemas for cleaning the bowels and treating different stomach and gut issues. These tools show how thorough Roman medicine was and how much attention they paid to even the smallest details. Doctors often saw wounds not just from swords and arrows, but also from stones or clubs. To treat such injuries, they used special metal probes to figure out how deep a wound was and if there was internal damage. These probes were super thin and flexible, letting doctors check a wound without making it bigger. To stop bleeding, they used bronze clamps and tweezers. In tougher cases with very heavy bleeding, they would cauterize the wound with a red-hot iron. This was incredibly painful but often saved lives. Roman medicine was so advanced that in some areas, there were even military medical schools where future doctors learned anatomy and surgery. These schools used teaching tools that were like works of art. Body parts, muscles, and bones were drawn on parchment. This helped students really understand human anatomy and get ready for their future work on the battlefield. Their knowledge was passed down from teachers to students and always updated with new discoveries. But maybe the most astonishing thing in a Roman doctor's toolkit was prosthetics. Yes, you heard that correctly. Even without modern tech, the Romans could make basic but working artificial limbs for those who had lost them. These artificial limbs were made of wood, metal, or leather, and helped soldiers get back to a somewhat normal life, though it was still hard. This showed not just their skill, but also their compassion. The Roman state saw it as their duty to look after its veterans, and prosthetics were one way to show that care. Once a wounded soldier was treated and deemed fit to return, he went back to his legion. This recovery usually took weeks or months, depending on how bad the injury was. During this time, he got his strength back and doctors kept an eye on him. Soldiers with serious injuries that meant they couldn't serve anymore weren't just left to fend for themselves. The Roman state looked after its veterans. These soldiers received what we'd call a pension, often as a plot of land. This land was usually in the provinces, where they could set up farms and live out their lives. This wasn't pure generosity. It was for practical reasons. This way, the state developed new areas, and these reliable veteran citizens helped strengthen Roman power in those regions. So a wounded soldier could start a new life, getting land as a reward for his service. On the flip side, those with minor injuries quickly went back to duty. Their experience and fighting skills were highly valued, so they were sent back to the battlefield. But even after fully healing, they always carried reminders of their injuries, scars that were badges of honor and pride. That's why veterans were so highly respected in the Roman legions. They brought not just battle experience, but also the memories of many fights. Roman soldiers fully understood how important medicine was. Each legion had special medical teams made up of trained doctors, known as medici. These experts had a deep understanding of anatomy, surgery, and injury treatment for their era. They used various tools like scalpels, tweezers, and probes, and applied herbal liquids and ointments to treat wounds and stop bleeding. Field hospitals, or valetudinaria, were a key part of Roman army camps. They were well-organized, clean facilities, where wounded soldiers got expert care. In the Valitudinaria, soldiers not only had their wounds treated, but also went through rehabilitation to get back to a full life. This helped Rome keep its best soldiers, rather than losing them due to injury. However, even the most advanced medical knowledge of the time couldn't always help. Many soldiers had to have limbs amputated, which naturally ended their military careers. But in these cases, they weren't just abandoned. The state looked after them, giving them not just land, but other forms of compensation too. Did Roman soldiers always get land after serving? Or were there other ways they were compensated? But before we answer that, let's look at how treatment and recovery actually happened. Because stitching up a wounded soldier so he doesn't come back with an extra leg is no small feat. The answer is next. Once the operation was successfully finished, the equally crucial stage of post-operative care began. The wounded soldier was moved to a separate bed, where the doctor's assistants looked after him. The main goal was to stop infection. Doctors knew that dirt could cause pus and death, so they regularly changed bandages made from clean linen cloth. They used different substances to treat wounds: honey, vinegar, and wine. The Romans instinctively knew these substances had germ-fighting qualities. Honey, for instance, stopped bacteria from growing. Vinegar and wine also helped clean wounds and speed up recovery. To prevent swelling and relieve pain, the wounded were also given liquid remedies made from various herbs like chamomile or sage. Recovery and physical therapy were also crucial. Soldiers with broken bones received wooden splints to keep their limbs still. Once bones healed, they did special exercises to get their joints and muscles moving again. These were much like modern physical therapy exercises. Soldiers slowly worked their way back to full movement, aiming to return to duty as quickly as possible. They also paid a lot of attention to nutrition. Wounded soldiers had a rich, high-calorie diet to give their bodies enough energy to recover. They were given easy-to-digest foods like broths, porridge, and fresh fruit. Wine was mixed with water to prevent dehydration, and provide extra nutrients. Good nutrition, along with quality care, greatly improved their chances of survival and a quick return to service. However, even the best care couldn't always save a soldier. In cases of severe injuries or amputations, their lives were changed forever. Veterans who couldn't keep serving weren't left without help from the state. Besides the land they got as a pension, they could also receive other compensation like a large one-time payment. This let them start a new life, perhaps by opening a small business or simply living off their land's income. Some veterans whose injuries stopped them from fighting but not from other tasks stayed in the Legion as instructors or office staff. Their experience and knowledge were incredibly valuable for training new recruits, as well as for managing records and logistics. This was another way the state supported its veterans, using their skills and experience to benefit the entire Legion. So, the system for caring for wounded soldiers and veterans in the Roman Empire was complex and well-planned. It included not just medical treatment but also social support, which helped wounded soldiers stay a part of society. This care, in turn, boosted the morale and loyalty of the soldiers, as each one knew that if they were wounded, the state wouldn't abandon them. Looking after soldiers both during and after battle was a cornerstone of Rome's military strength. The Roman army was famous for being organized, and their medical service was just as well structured. Each legion had its own medical team, consisting of a head doctor and their assistants. These were well-paid experts who held a high position. Their work was incredibly important, as the army's fighting strength directly depended on it. The command knew that wounded soldiers weren't just a problem, but a valuable asset. Every trained soldier was costly, and losing one was something they wanted to avoid. Therefore, the Romans put a lot of resources into improving military medicine. Doctors had the best tools and medicines, and their knowledge was passed down through generations. Medical teams traveled with the army on campaigns, always ready to provide help. They didn't fight in battles but stayed in the camp's rear, setting up their valetudinaria. This system meant they could give help as quickly as possible, greatly improving survival rates. Even with all its advancements, Roman medicine couldn't always help. Many soldiers had injuries that stopped them from returning to active service. In those cases, their lives were changed for good. Losing a limb, sight, or suffering other severe injuries meant the end of their army careers. However, the Roman state didn't abandon its veterans. This was a practical approach, based on the idea that soldiers' loyalty directly depended on how well the state looked after them. Soldiers who knew they'd be cared for if seriously injured were willing to fight with more courage. Veterans who couldn't serve in the military received a pension, usually as a plot of land. These plots were often in the provinces, which helped the state develop new areas and strengthen Roman influence. Besides land, some veterans got a large one-time payment. This gave them a chance to start fresh, maybe open a business, or simply live off their land's earnings. Such a reward was not just a thank you, but also a strong motivation for other soldiers who saw their service was appreciated. Another reward was the chance to stay in service, but as an instructor or office worker. Injured veterans who couldn't fight but could do other jobs could share their priceless experience with new recruits. They taught them battle strategies, discipline, and how to survive in combat. This not only gave veterans jobs, but also made the army stronger and more professional. Their knowledge and skills were incredibly valuable, and their presence in the camps reminded young soldiers of the importance of military duty. Overall, the Roman Empire's system for veteran care was well planned and worked well. It built a strong connection between the state and the army, ensuring soldiers' loyalty and stability in society. But what about those with severe injuries? Ever wondered what happened to soldiers who lost an arm or a leg in battle? Were they just given some land and sent home? We'll tell you more about that soon. Even after full recovery, many Roman soldiers couldn't go back to a completely normal life. Serious injuries left deep scars, lost limbs, blindness, and ongoing pain. All these issues could lead to being discharged from service. However, the state didn't leave these individuals to fend for themselves. Veterans who couldn't fight anymore received special support. As mentioned, they might get land, but other forms of help existed too. For instance, They might be given light office work behind the lines where they could help the state without fighting. They could also get regular payments to support their families. This was part of Rome's social policies, designed to keep citizens loyal and society stable. The Romans knew that unhappy veterans could cause problems, so they tried to ensure they had a decent life. Therefore, an injury didn't always mean the end of a career, but rather a change in what they did. The Roman government also understood that mental trauma was just as serious as physical injuries. Soldiers who survived brutal battles and saw their friends die often suffered from something like post-traumatic stress. While the term PTSD didn't exist, the Romans instinctively knew these individuals needed special care. Veterans returning from war were brought back into society and given chances to work in peaceful jobs. This helped them adjust to civilian life and move past the horrors of war. Among wounded veterans, those who continued to serve, even in office roles, were highly respected. They were called emeritus, meaning retired. Their experience and knowledge were priceless for training new recruits. They worked as instructors, teaching battle tactics, discipline, and survival skills. This not only gave veterans jobs, but also made the army stronger and more professional. Their presence in the camps reminded young soldiers of military duty's importance, and that even with injuries, they could still contribute to Rome. Another way they offered social support was by giving veterans land and colonies. Colonies were new towns the Romans built in conquered areas. Veterans who got land there became not just landowners, but also the bedrock of new Roman communities. They strengthened Roman influence in the area by bringing Roman culture, laws, and order. It was a win-win partnership. The state gained dependable citizens in new lands, and veterans got a good life after serving. This well-planned system for veteran care was a key reason for the Roman Empire's long-lasting power. Soldiers knew the state wouldn't abandon them when things got tough, so they fought with more courage and loyalty. Looking after soldiers both during and after battle was a cornerstone of Rome's military strength. Beyond physical injuries, soldiers also suffered mental trauma too. Being in constant battles, seeing comrades die, and the fear they felt all took a toll. Today we'd call this post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. But in ancient Rome, that term didn't exist. Roman doctors weren't psychologists, but they instinctively understood that soldiers needed support. They believed that spending time with fellow soldiers, sharing meals, and joining in religious ceremonies helped bring back mental balance. Also, veterans could share their stories, which helped them deal with the stress they'd been through. Roman religion also played a big part in this. Soldiers believed the gods protected them and that they were fighting for a good cause. This gave them strength and helped them cope with the horrors of war. Taking part in sacrifices and festivals for the gods of war helped them get back to normal life. Returning to a peaceful life was also crucial for their recovery. The state gave veterans land so they could become farmers. Working the land, starting a family, and being part of community life helped soldiers forget the past's horrors. It was a kind of therapy that let them find a new purpose and feel useful to society. Plus, many veterans stayed close with their old comrades even after leaving the army. They formed veteran communities where they could socialize, share experiences, and help one another. It was a social network that gave them support and a sense of belonging. In these groups, veterans found understanding and respect, which was especially important for those struggling with the mental impact of war. Roman society as a whole held veterans in great esteem. They were seen as heroes who had given a part of their lives for Rome's benefit. This attitude, in turn, helped them adapt and blend into civilian life quickly. Veterans often held important positions in local government, becoming respected community members and leaders. So, the Roman state and society created conditions where soldiers with mental trauma could not only survive, but also lead full and dignified lives. Medical education in Rome was highly developed. Doctors learned from their teachers and also studied the writings of famous Greek physicians like Hippocrates and Galen. They went through long training, learning about anatomy, how the body is built, surgery, and pharmacology, medicines. Medical knowledge was passed down through families, and military doctors, after gaining hands-on experience in campaigns, returned to Rome to become civilian doctors, sharing their expertise across the empire. This sharing of experience was vital. Military medicine developed new methods and techniques that later became part of civilian medicine. Much of this knowledge was written down in medical books that we still have today. For instance, the writings of Galen, Emperor Marcus Aurelius's personal doctor, include many descriptions of different injuries and how to treat them. These texts formed the foundation for medical advancements for many centuries. The advanced military medicine was extremely important to the Roman state. It helped the army stay ready for battle by keeping fewer soldiers out of action. Soldiers were confident they'd get help if wounded, which boosted their spirits. Also, looking after veterans helped create a stable society. Soldiers returning from war who received land or other support became trustworthy citizens who strengthened Roman power in their local areas. They became role models for young people who saw that military service was not only honorable, but also guaranteed them a good future. The sharing of medical knowledge by military doctors had lasting effects across the entire empire. After returning from the front, experienced medics opened private practices in cities and provinces, teaching new students. They brought with them advanced treatment methods proven in the field, which greatly improved healthcare for everyone. This continuous sharing of knowledge and experience built a strong foundation for medicine as both a science and a profession. Doctors who had served in the army were highly respected because their skills had been tested in the toughest conditions. Because of this, valetudinaria, private hospitals based on military ones, started appearing in Roman cities and even small towns. Not only soldiers were treated there, but civilians too. This shows that military innovations weren't kept secret within the army, but became available to everyone. While not everyone could access it, this healthcare system was much better than what other states offered at the time. The impact of Roman military medicine can still be seen today. Many organizational principles of medical services, like having field hospitals and permanent clinics, are still used in modern military and civilian medicine. The use of antiseptics, surgical instruments, and recovery methods, first tested by Roman military doctors, became the foundation of many modern medical practices. It's important to note that Roman care for veterans also shaped public policy. Social programs designed to help former soldiers became a model for many countries that followed. The Romans were the first to grasp that investing in veterans wasn't just spending money, but investing in the country's stability and success. This policy created a strong cycle. Soldiers who knew their hard work would be rewarded fought with more dedication, and veterans who received support became loyal citizens. So, Roman military medicine and social policies for veterans were closely linked, both working to strengthen the state. They show that the Roman Empire's success wasn't just from military power, but also from a well-planned government system that valued every citizen. This legacy lives on in our modern understanding of military medicine and the state's responsibility to those who defend it. We've learned how Roman civilization tackled one of the toughest challenges: battlefield wounds. Their approach was surprisingly practical and humane for its time. They created a system that saved thousands of soldiers' lives, and this was a key factor in the Roman Empire's success. We've discussed a lot about how the Romans treated the wounded, but what do you think was their most important medical achievement in history? Let us know in the comments. And to make sure you don't miss our new videos about the ancient world, remember to subscribe to our channel.